Welcome back. So the first puzzle piece type I'm going to make is going to be a trigger that's going to check which object is inside that trigger. If it's the correct object, if it's the object that we want in that trigger, congratulations, our puzzle's in the right state. If it's not the right object that we want inside of that trigger, then our puzzle is in the wrong state. So it's going to be nice and easy to set up, and we're going to get this up and running. So first thing we're going to do is I'm going to create a new blueprint that is going to have a trigger box in it, but it's going to be a child of our puzzle piece. So I'm going to right click, I'm going to create a new blueprint class. Instead of one of these actors, I'm going to search in my classes, and I want to be a child of puzzle piece. So if I select that, it creates the new blueprint. I want blueprint push puzzle trigger. And I'll open this up. So right now my push puzzle trigger, there's nothing there except this interesting little icon that shows up so that we can see where it's been placed in the world. I want a location, a box that I can overlap. So I'm going to add a component that is that box. So I'm going to add a new component, right? And it's going to be called a box collider, right? So box collision. So there we go. Now we have a box. And this box represents the area in which our object can be overlapped. I will then go to my event graph. If I go to my event graph, I notice I've got the parent actions from the parents on all of these. I don't need those. I'm not going to do any of those setups right now, so I'm going to actually remove those parents. I'm not going to do anything on tick, so I don't need my tick. I am going to use my end overlap, so I'm going to go ahead and add that event now. These begin and end overlaps that use the entire actor will include everything on that actor. So that includes the entire collider. You could create events that just look for this box rather than looking for the entire object. But in our case, they're both going to work because any part of this trigger gets overlapped. We want it to count as an overlap. So we've got our begin play, we've got our begin overlap, our end overlap. We're going to be able to grab from our parent the variable that we wanted for is success, right? So I can get my is success and I could set my is success. Now, one thing that I don't like too much about Unreal is that when that variable is part of the parent, it doesn't show up in my variables list, right? I don't see it over here. I would like to, so I always bring one out so I can copy and paste when I need them. It's okay for them to just be sitting on the side, not doing anything. I can delete them when I don't need them anymore, but we'll get that set up. So here's our logic. We want to check if a certain object is inside of our trigger. So I'm going to add a new variable, right? It's going to be actor to check for. It's going to be exposed, and of course it's going to be of type actor. Remember, an actor is any object in our game world, so we can check if any actor from our game world is in there. That gives us our actor variable. And we're going to do our begin play. So when we start, we need to check what if it was already in there. Well, we would need to kind of check to see if this object is in there when we start. So I'm going to say on my begin play, right, I'm going to check if the actor I'm going to check for, I'm going to get that. And we're going to look for overlap. So we're going to get is overlapping actor, right? And this is going to tell us whether or not we're overlapping another actor. I'm going to do a branch based on that. And I'm going to check, is the actor to check for overlapping myself? Well, I could come off of other and I could get a reference to self. Bing. That's one great way to do it. Another way is that if I actually break this link, The default target is myself. So if I connect this to the other one, I automatically target myself. It's just a neat little way that it does the same thing. It just whichever way you want to have it look. So right now on begin play, we're going to check if this actor is overlapping ourselves, right? If it is, right, then we need to set our is success. So that's why I made a copy so that I don't have to hunt for that, to true. If it's not, we're going to set it to false. So there we go. Begin play. Check. Are we overlapping ourselves and the actor that we're checking for? If it's successful, true. If it's not successful, right? If it's not overlapping, set it to false. Now, when we start overlapping, as soon as we begin to overlap, right? What we're going to need to do is we're going to check if the actor that entered is the same as the actor we're looking for. Then same idea. We're going to set it to true if it enters, right? So we're assuming that if it was in there on start, then it's going to be set to true as in there. So we just need to check that when we enter, right, we'll call a branch. And we'll just check, is the other actor that entered equal to or the same actor as the actor that we're checking for. If it's the actor we're checking for and that's true, right, then we can set and say success. We have entered the trigger. Our object is in there, right? So we'll set that to true. So then we're going to calculate on our exit. So when we exit the trigger, if the object, so we're going to do a branch, we're going to say, is the object that left the actor that we're checking for? Get that actor. Check if they're both equals. Here we go. Is the object that left the object that we were looking for? If that is true, then we're going to set is success to false. The object's not in that trigger anymore. Very simple way of creating a puzzle piece that when it starts, it tells you if the right piece is in there, right? When anything enters, it checks to see if it's the right one to enter. If so, success. When it exits, checks to see if it's the right one to exit. False. So we're going to save, compile. Now we have a push trigger that we can test with our objects. So if I bring one of these into the world, I'm going to bring it into the world, put it in my spotlight here. So now my object is sitting in the spotlight so that we can say, if you enter that spotlight, I may need to scale it up to be a little nicer to my players. So they don't have to be in the center. They just have to be partially in. If something is in that spotlight, we'll check for it and set the success as to true or false. Which object am I going to look for? Well, if I have that selected, here's my actor to check for. I can choose any actor in my level. I'm going to choose my armchair, which I'm actually going to take the time. Be kind here, and I'm going to rename that armchair yellow. All right, so that I know that it's the yellow one. That way when I select over here, I'm like, oh, armchair yellow. That's the one I'm looking for. By default, right, it'll check, it'll set whether this is success or not. So we'll be able to take a look at that as we run. Now it's going to try and check if this armchair is in there. One thing I need to be sure of, I'm checking that my armchair is set to be movable. Correct. Awesome. Physics, I'm checking to make sure that it simulates physics so I can push it around. Awesome. It is. Under collision, I'm going to check for overlaps. So generate overlap events. Yes, it sure is. So now I know that that chair is going to actually check if it's in that section. I'm going to go back to my puzzle manager, right? This is my puzzle itself. This is what the brains of my puzzle, or the ghost of the puzzle, the spirit of the puzzle that's making all of the decisions is. If I select that, it needs a select of puzzle pieces. Well, I'm going to add a puzzle piece, so there's one in there, and it's going to be my push puzzle trigger that I just added. I'm going to be kind here again, and I'm going to name that yellow. That way I know that that's my yellow trigger that's looking for yellow. And so now when I press play, we're running, right? I can go over, I can knock my object into the trigger. Boom, gnome explodes when the object's in the trigger. But to be a true puzzle, I want multiples of these, right? So I'm going to make me some copies. So here's my objects. I'm going to duplicate them. We're going to move them. Here's another one on this side, right? And then I'm going to take this chair over here. It's not going to be yellow too. I'm going to make it a blue one. Right? Armchair blue. Push puzzle. I'm going to make this one blue. I'm going to select my object. I'm going to go to these materials in here and I'm going to find a nice blue material. I'm going to make my chair actually look blue. Boom. Or as blue as I can get it, right? I'll select my trigger here. We're going to make sure that it's checking to see if the blue one is in there, right? And make sure this one is checking to see if the yellow is in there. So that's armchair yellow. This one is looking for armchair blue. So my trigger now looks for the blue armchair. This trigger looks for the yellow armchair. My puzzle manager says I'm going to have 2 puzzle pieces. The yellow trigger, right? And then this one is my blue trigger. So making sure that my 2 puzzle pieces are set up. So now both of those objects have to be true in order for my game to be true. Press play. I'm going to run over here. Oh, before I press play, I'm going to also change my light color. So here's my light, right? Select my light instance. I'm going to change its color. There we go. Now I've got a blue light. So now when I press play, oh look, blue chair, blue light, yellow chair, yellow light. Let's see if it works. I push my chair into the light. So let me just try to make sure I'm covered enough. Yeah, I can see the light on the chair. Push my yellow chair in. Boom. Gnome explodes when they're both in. Right? Do it in the opposite order. Push my yellow chair in first. I'll stay in the light. Hopefully that stays in the light. Now when I push my blue chair in, hopefully it blows up my gnome. There we go. So we've now got our push puzzles that we can push objects into other objects. That was just creating a puzzle piece that has a variable as to whether or not it's true. We check and set that variable every time we make a change. So every time something entered that light, we made the change and we made that setup.